very good evening to everybody who's joined us today. We had a very large number of registrations, so just goes to show how interested people are in the topic. Very quick introductions from my side. I'm Sharon Weir. I'm one of the co-founders at Fourth Wheel, and a little bit about social impact dialogues. This is our fifth dialogue for the year. We've been focusing a lot on practical sort of challenges faced in the development sector, specifically in the Indian context, and we've been getting great professionals, experts together to talk about what are the solutions for these, how can we kind of pivot strategies, look at new ways of doing social development work. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce our two speakers today, Amber and Syed. Maybe quick introductions from their side, and we can jump right into our power-packed question-answer session that we've planned for the group today. So Amber, could I ask you to introduce yourself, and then Syed, quick introductions from yourself, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Amber Liskey, and I'm a SurveyCTO Customer Support Associate with a background in research and data analysis with a particular focus on food security in sub-Saharan Africa. And thank you all for joining today.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you guys are joining us from. My name is Syed Gilani. I'm also one of the customer support associates here at Debility. Prior to joining Debility, I was finishing my undergrad in applied mathematics, and after graduation, I joined SurveyCTO. So thank you all for joining us today.
Great. Yes. Also, if you all could please use the chat box to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, why you're here, what you'd like to learn about. And since we just have 1 hour and 60 minutes, please feel free to paste your comments, your thoughts, questions, and use the chat box actively. Yes, so I think let's dive right in. And Syed, first, a couple of questions for you, and would really like you to bring some perspective on these very real challenges that we face. Let's start with some context. Now, if we're looking at an NGO program or a CSR program, whether it's looking at improving literacy, providing computers, looking at agriculture projects, a lot of times we see that when we go to do an impact evaluation, we do hear a lot of times that farmers would say everything was great. There's a lot of bias that comes with when you're asking someone to tell us how their experience was with programs which are inherently seen to be beneficial. So there's social desirability bias from that point. There's also, they don't want to look ungrateful. There's expectation of further support. And hence, a lot of times we miss capturing negative outcomes, unintended outcomes. So would really like you to talk about what are the tools and solutions that you'd propose for professionals like us to gather honest feedback and encourage, actual insights into what happened with programs. The second thing and the second question I'd definitely like you to also talk about is sensitive topics. Now, when we talk about dietary practices, when we talk about open defecation, when we talk about asking teachers how did you improve your teaching learning methods? So there's again a lot of bias related to sensitive topics. And of course, as you would be aware, a lot of populations that we work with also have literacy issues, right? Understanding the complexity of change, etc. So lots to unfold here, Syed, but over to you to take the audience through what solutions exist in the space.
All right, yes. Thank you, Sharon, for asking those questions. First of all, you guys can hear me properly, right?
Okay. Yes.
So yeah, SurveyCTO offers various tools to specifically design to mitigate these challenges posed by social desirability bias and other behavioral factors that affect data quality. The strategies and tools that we will focus on for this webinar include discrete response mechanisms, audio-assisted features, specialized educational tools, and tools for data accuracy in agricultural settings. Recognizing and addressing these factors in survey design is crucial. While bias cannot be fully eliminated, it can be minimized with the right countermeasures. SurveyCTO uses these innovative tools and strategies to enhance data accuracy. I will now discuss discrete response mechanisms and then the use of audio assistance when conducting surveys. So yeah, in data collection, social desirability bias often arises when respondents over-report positive outcomes or under-report negative experiences, especially in the context of programs perceived as beneficial, such as educational enhancements, infrastructure projects, agricultural innovations, etc. Survey topics particularly prone to social desirability bias include self-reporting on abilities, personality, sexual behavior, drug use, etc. This bias can significantly impact data quality, leading to skewed insights and potentially flawed decision-making. To mitigate social desirability bias, particularly in these contexts, SurveyCTO employs discrete response mechanisms that enhance respondent privacy and encourage honest feedback. This strategy allows the interviewer to hand the respondent a tablet with the questions presented visually. SurveyCTO offers the options of providing earphones so that the respondent can listen to these questions and respond by clicking on images on the screen, maintaining their anonymity. The interviewer then turns away, enabling the respondent to select their answers privately. Ensuring respondent privacy can significantly reduce their social desirability bias, where the respondents might otherwise provide answers they think are socially acceptable rather than their true thoughts or behaviors. Visual aids play a significant role in discrete response mechanisms, including images, icons, or even videos that help respondent understand the questions better, makes it easier for them to answer, especially if the respondents have literacy challenges. Literacy rates of the sample population can impact data quality, as many surveys may be designed for literate populations only, skewing accurate sampling without accounting for appropriate survey tools for the sample population. Results can be skewed if only certain populations are surveyed. To tackle this, instead of asking respondents to type out their answers, we can provide them with a set of images to choose from, which can be particularly effective in low literacy populations. By ensuring that respondents that their answers remain private and unseen by the interviewer, these mechanisms encourage more honest and truthful responses. This way, the reduction in bias is essential for obtaining accurate data, particularly in studies where respondents might otherwise be compelled to align their answers with social norms or expectations. So we'll move to audio assistance now. Using audio assistance is the key to successfully employ discrete response mechanisms. When designing the survey, use audio recordings to present survey questions and answer choices to respondents. This method is particularly effective for individuals who may have difficulty reading or understanding written text. By listening to the questions and respondents can better comprehend what is being asked, leading to more accurate and reliable data. To implement this, we need to create audio recordings for each question and answer choice. These recordings can be made using human voice or text-to-speech platforms. Once the audio files are ready, they need to be integrated into the survey form. In SurveyCTO, this can be done by specifying the audio files in the media column of your XLS form. Additionally, you can use the autoplay column to ensure that the audio plays automatically when a respondent reaches a particular question. One of the many advantages of using audio assistance is its ability to promote inclusivity. By providing an alternative mode of communication, audio-based questionnaires ensure that individuals who might otherwise be excluded from the survey process due to literacy barriers can participate fully. So in many research studies, this inclusivity is crucial for obtaining a representative sample. Asking sensitive questions on surveys is often key to gathering necessary insights on some research topics. Given the nature of these questions, however, respondents may feel uncomfortable and reluctant to respond accurately. To overcome this and ensure quality data, there's a wide range of recommended methods, including self-administered questionnaires. SurveyCTO provides a ready-made example of such in the form of audio computer-assisted self-interview, ACASI. ACASI is one of many published workflows on the Hub. The Hub is SurveyCTO's data collection template gallery that provides workflows you can install with a few simple clicks. On the Hub, you can find many expert-made workflow templates that let you get started with high-quality data collection quickly and efficiently. So make sure to check that out. While there are no perfect solutions that ensure response accuracy to sensitive questions, Akasi offers an alternative approach to traditional face-to-face interviews, enabling respondents to share information independently and without having to directly engage with an interviewer. This additional degree of response confidentiality is the key to reduce social desirability bias and then ultimately produce better estimates. The Akasi workflow includes interactive training modules to help respondents become familiar with the survey interface. The audio guides the respondent through an interactive training. The training shows the prompts and images that will be used and explains how to proceed through the module. Respondents can practice answering these questions and receive feedback, ensuring they're comfortable with the survey process before actually starting the survey. You can see an example of this here in the slide, where neutral images have been used to represent answer choices. The respondent must provide responses that show comprehension before proceeding to the next module. Once the module begins, the respondent hears an audio recording of each question. Potential answers are associated with neutral images on the screen, and the respondent is instructed to select the image that corresponds with his or her answer. This type of Akasi setup is used by many organizations to conduct surveys on sensitive topics to ensure respondent privacy and minimize the effects of many biases. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Syed. And Syed, if you could, talk a little bit also about, have you seen bias reducing in your personal experience? Any projects that you'd like to talk about where, you use these tools? Any sort of insight on how to do this better? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, Sharon, thank you. So this type of Akasi setup has been used in many case studies by many organizations that use SurveyCTO. We have, for example, we have ICF that used the Akasi setup to cover a self-administered survey that was used for research study for again in modern slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So this was used for households who have been sexually exploited for commercial gain in the region in Uganda. So
Mm-hmm.
Akasi helped minimize the social desirability biases in the respondents provided for these sensitive topics. This is just one such case study, but SurveyCTO has the Akasi setup has been used by many organizations
Sure.
to cover this.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you so much. Over to you, Amber. I think what we'd also like to talk about today is and I think we have a lot of NGOs which work in the education space. So, there's a lot of bias when you start using standardized tools. There's enumerator bias in terms of scoring, accurate judgments, measurement, reliability of the test use, etc. So, I'd really like you to talk about what are the tools that Service CTO has built that could be customized and contextualized to the Indian context. And that's from the education space. I think also, when we're working with low literacy populations, with farmers, with estimations, there's a huge issue, right? That how do you estimate your land that you own, or the crop productivity and yield over time? And a lot of times it becomes very challenging to ensure that we're collecting accurate and the right data. So would really like you to talk about the tools that we have at hand, the solutions on standardizing and automating education test, as well as how do you ensure more accurate estimations of, agricultural production, outcomes, etc. So over to you, Amber.
Thank you, Sharon. First of all, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to just also cut my video because I'm having some connection issues, just to improve that a little bit, if that's okay. But I'll first address your question related to education. So SurveyCTO has some pre-made tools, as you mentioned, specifically for assessing reading and math skills in children. And these tools can help ensure the integrity and quality of data collected by really standardizing this assessment process. And I wanted to highlight that while these tools that I'm going to discuss are pre-programmed and available for download for immediate use as is, they can also be customized to meet your specific needs. So they can be used as templates and adapted to any other standardized tests that you may be familiar with in any language as well. So again, while I'll be discussing some specific tools, keep in mind that this logic can be applied to any other education assessments as well, as I'm sure there are many out there. So these tools are EGRA, the early grade reading assessment, and EGMA, the early grade mathematics assessment. And these tools were originally developed by RTI International. Both of these tests were designed to be administered orally to evaluate the foundational skills in young children, and especially in low-income settings. These are both standardized tools, but they focus on different subject areas and have distinct methodologies and subtasks involved. So just a little bit more about each of these tests. EGRA you can leave it on the previous slide.
Sorry.
So EGRA is made up of a number of subtasks focused on measuring literacy, such as familiarity with letter names and sounds, syllable identification, reading, vocabulary and comprehension, etc. And then similar to EGRA is EGMA, which assesses foundational mathematics skills in young learners. And this focuses on number sense, operations, and problem solving. So the design of these specific tools in SurveyCTO is really made possible using SurveyCTO's field plugin capabilities, which can support a wide range of different activity types. And for those who may not be familiar with SurveyCTO, a field plugin is a feature that allows users to really customize and extend the functionality of standard field types within their surveys to meet whatever specific needs. So on our website, you can find a catalog of these field plugins that are already available for use, but also anyone can customize or create new field plugins as well. And our website provides specific guidance on doing so for anybody who is interested in that. All right, next slide. So how can these EGRA and EGMA tools help minimize bias and improve data accuracy? As I mentioned, EGRA and EGMA are designed to be administered orally, making these tests particularly beneficial for evaluating early literacy skills. So an oral assessment can really give us more information about what students actually do know rather than what they do not know, and where they are in the reading acquisition process early on, versus a more traditional test where maybe a student is asked to silently read a passage and answer some comprehension questions. Well, let's say they were able to read it partially, they didn't fully understand, and they answered all of the questions wrong. Someone looking at that would, if they see 0 out of 10, they would say, oh, this child can't read. But the idea of EGRA is to really show, okay, so maybe a student does know certain letters or know the sounds that letters or combination of letters makes, but they don't fully understand how to read yet, but they do or they do not have those foundational skills, which are crucial for learning to read later on. So the tasks in both EGRA and EGMA are designed to measure specific skills objectively. These tasks have clear criteria for correct and incorrect responses, which helps to ensure that these assessments are objective and consistent across different students and settings. So SurveyCTO really supports the administration of these assessments by allowing the assessors to record the responses directly into the platform as well. So the data is secure and is of high quality. Similarly, these tools have standardized protocols for administration, which helps ensure that each respondent is assessed under similar conditions, regardless of the context. So this standardization minimizes variations that could arise from different assessors' interpretations or methods. And according to data, these tools have been administered in more than 65 countries in over 100 languages since they were developed, I believe, around 2006, which also demonstrates their adaptability and reliability across diverse contexts. They're really meant to be customized and used while maintaining a level of standardization as well. And then furthermore, the use of field plugins, as I mentioned, allows for automated timing and scoring of the tasks. So this minimizes the human intervention and reduces the likelihood of bias introduced by assessors. So this automation really helps ensure that all the students are given the same amount of time to complete each task and that their responses are scored objectively on predefined criteria. And then these recorded times are saved in the metadata in SurveyCTO down to, I believe, the millisecond, and provide a detailed log of exactly how long each task took. And then that can be used for further analysis and quality control. And I wanted to also add that SurveyCTO offers additional field types for quality control. They're not pre-programmed into these tests, but we do have other field types such as audio audits that can be programmed into the survey to record specific fields or portions of the form or at random throughout the form. And then they can be listened to later to ensure that for quality control.
Amber, really quickly, because it's a very relevant question in the chat box right now about EGRA and EGMA also. So does EGRA and EGMA also capture audio? You did say there are audio checks that you could put in, but do they capture audio of what students speak? And is that manually assessed using this tool? I think that's very relevant question while we are here. So do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. It's not already programmed into these tools specifically. I think that's just something that's assessed, as the assessor is doing the test one-on-one with the student. They're listening and they are themselves marking. Did the student get this correct or incorrect, etc. But as I just mentioned, very relevant. You can include these audio audits, and you could actually record the entire test if you wanted. Just keeping in mind that sometimes these audio files can be rather long. So you might want to think about which portions of the test to record, or breaking these audio audits into multiple audits throughout a single test, so that when you go back and listen, you're not having to maybe go through 30 minutes or an hour-long audio single recording, but maybe you have it so that, okay, this first section is recorded in this audio, the second section is recorded in the second audio, so that it's easier to navigate between the audio files. But yeah, that's absolutely something that can be done within SurveyCTO as well.
Absolutely. And I'd just like to add, and this kind of came up in our last webinar as well. I think we personally do audio checks and include audio during the pilot stage. So, you can ensure that the enumerator are asking the question correctly, how students are taking the test. So you can kind of, build and you can when you have a smaller sample during pilot, it's easier for you to go through that, large data set. So just to add, I mean, you might have very crucial audio, you keep audio checks for crucial questions, which might be a little subjective for the main study. But if you really want to check for how well the tool is working, how well your enumerators are collecting data, then I think doing, detailed audio checks during the pilot stage is probably a bit more time and resource efficient. So I hope that answers your question, Prasant. And
Exactly. Thank you, Sharon. That's a great point. And I wanted to reiterate that you can also program the audio audits to be randomized. So let's say you have thousands of tests that you're conducting. You could say, I want an audio audit to pop up 20% of the time or something like that, so that you're not having to go back and listen to the audios of thousands of tests, but you could just take a sample and make sure that, things are going as expected.
perfect. And Amber, sorry, I just want to kind of take two more questions that I have in the chat box, and just to and please add on to this. But I think one, there's a question on, are we doing survey CTO related features? I think yes, since we have experts from survey CTO, we are trying to look at the space in terms of what exists. But please feel free to also use this platform to talk about other platforms, other features that, can be looked at as solutions to avoid the biases we are talking about. So for this 1 hour webinar, we're definitely focusing on the features for Service CTO. The other question, and Amber, maybe you could take this, and I could add to it, is also someone's asking about standardized tools for assessing life skills and employability skills. So my short answer for this webinar, again, we're looking a lot at the education and agriculture spaces. But yeah, Amber, are there any standardized tools for employability, and what are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. Off the top of my head, I'm not very familiar with any standardized tools that assess life skills and employability skills. Outside, I mean, I know there are many, but I'm not sure that we have any already pre-programmed in SurveyCTO.
Mhm.
However, SurveyCTO is designed so that any tool that exists, so maybe there is a standardized tool, that was developed by, any international organization or whatever that's considered, widely used. You can easily program that into SurveyCTO, and customize it as you need. So anything like that, if it doesn't already exist on our platform, it can be created. And we're constantly, we also have something called the Hub, which is new, and it's a repository of workflows. It's under the Discover tab when you log into your server, and we are always adding new templates and workflows as well. And we work with partner organizations, or we create them internally. So it could be that at some point, we do have a pre-made workflow available for a wider range of different contexts as well.
Perfect. Yes, and I just like to reiterate, I think, sorry, I have to get your name now. Shailendra, I think to answer your question, life skills, I mean, now, they're also known as 21st century skills. There are the 7 Cs. So I think it's also kind of defined and understood by different organizations probably differently. The matrix used, some use psychometric testing on, Likert scales, some use case studies, some use observations. So there are also, while the metrics are different, the way of measurement, the tools used are different. But I think at the end of the day, I'd like to bring us back to the fact that these workflows that Amber is talking about set some sort of a template on how you can, objectively measure certain things, standardize subtasks, ensure quality, timing, scoring. So, while they might not be something contextualized for the Indian context, I think there are a lot of tools that you can play around with, a platform like SurveyCTO. I will come back to your questions. If there's anything more, please feel free to use your use the chat box, and I'll bring you in, Shailendra, at a later time. But that's my quick answer to that. There's one more, Amber, and maybe then we can go into the agriculture piece. So,
Sure.
and we discussed this, when we were talking internally, that does the EGRA and EGMA comply with Nippon recommendations, so by the government of India? So, Nitin, to answer your question, we were looking at, what does this look like when we want to do an ASAR standardized test? Or, like Shailendra asked, what does this look like when we want to do life skills or a 21st century skills test? So I'm not sure what you would say, Amber, about compliance with the Indian context, but I think, again, it sets up certain workflows and systems for us to then use the questions that we want. So that's my answer. But yeah, Amber, do you want to build on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Sharon, you've covered it pretty well, but so EGRA and EGMA were designed, separately from SurveyCTO. They're designed by an international consortium of all different organizations, and so they're made to be kind of standardized across a lot of different contexts. But I'm not super familiar with every single context and the Indian context and whether or not they comply specifically. But just as Sharon was saying, they can be customized however you need. So you can use them as a template, as kind of a skeleton for the questions that you are going to input specifically for whatever standardized test that you would like to use in your context. So maybe EGRA and EGMA aren't compliant. I'm not sure. But whatever test that you're going to use, you would just switch out the question, within the survey, and you can still use the same functionalities, the field plugins, the collecting whatever metadata, et cetera. So it really is, it's designed to be whatever you want it to be, really, like just kind of like a starting point, a jumping off point for your own survey design.
Awesome. Yes. Sorry, we kind of got lost, but the questions were very, very interesting. So I just thought we'd take them. And yes, let's move
Yeah,
on. Sorry
that's great.
about that. Yes.
Yeah, before we jump into the next topic, I just wanted to mention too that both of the EGRA and EGMA forms can be downloaded from our website. And then also we do have a webinar that was recorded from a couple years ago that discusses the SurveyCTO's EGRA tool more specifically. So I wanted to just share the link to that webinar in the chat as well. So anyone can take a look.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Amber.
so that's up in the chat, and then we can, yeah. So now we can move on to the next topic for now. All right, so as we were discussing, collecting accurate data among low literacy populations can be really difficult, and relying on respondent estimates can also lead to data inaccuracies. Implementing very specific objective measurement methods in your surveys can help minimize these measurement errors and reduce any bias and inaccuracies. So using agriculture as an example, land measurements is a case where this occurs. These are often really critical components of many household surveys, especially those focused on agricultural productivity, land use, economic studies, and various food security assessments. But instead of relying only on farmers' estimates, in SurveyCTO, you can capture GPS data for precise measurements.
Mm-hmm.
So using the features in SurveyCTO, either the enumerators or the farmers themselves can walk the perimeter of their fields or whatever piece of land is being looked at while pressing a button on their device, essentially enabling SurveyCTO to calculate the exact area of the field automatically in real time. So that really, that method helps ensure that the data is as accurate as possible. And then in certain studies, it might be useful to still ask a farmer for their own estimates, and then that data can be compared, which can be useful in and of itself for kind of understanding, the effect of perceptions and bias on the data and these differences between an objective measurement and an estimate. So to provide a little further explanation of this method in SurveyCTO, without getting too technical, basically, first, you will need to collect the GPS coordinates that define the perimeter of the field or plot of land. So this is, as I mentioned, usually done as someone walks around the field with a GPS-enabled device and records the coordinates at regular intervals. And in SurveyCTO, you can either do this manually where you put a point along the way, or you can program it so that it does it at whatever intervals you'd like, every 5 seconds, every 20 seconds, every minute, whatever it is, depending on how big the land is, etc., or whatever your needs might be. And then once those GPS coordinates have been collected, the area of the field can be automatically calculated in the survey. We have a function, it's the area function, that can be put in a hidden calculate field within the form. So the enumerator looking at the interface on their phone, they won't see that math happening. It'll be happening behind the scenes. But let's say you want to later recall that area or whatever calculation into a visible field, to be referenced. You can reference any hidden calculate field as well. So if you want to say, oh, your plot A is however many square meters large, you can actually reference that within the survey form. And then for instance, just as an example, this area calculation could then be used within the form, as I was saying. An example use case of this is to estimate the crop production of a plot. So let's say the typical yield per square meter of a certain crop. And then you can multiply that by the total plot area, and then you can kind of have an estimate of what the typical yield is for that plot over a certain time, whatever it is. The methodology depends on you to program that into the survey, but just to give that as an example, that's possible to be done within the survey itself. And then also, just important to mention that SurveyCTO supports offline data collection as well, which is really essential for working in rural areas with no connectivity or limited connectivity to the internet. So when collecting data in an area without internet connection, geopoint fields do not need access to the internet to work. They simply rely on the device's built-in GPS chip. So it is important. Most newer devices are all going to have those capabilities, but there are still some phones out there in circulation that don't have a built-in GPS system. So just, if collecting GPS coordinates is crucial to your data collection, just making sure that any devices are, more newer and have these capabilities ahead of time. So also just there may be circumstances where the enumerator needs to select points on a map. I just wanted to mention that we do have a feature where, let's say you're working in a completely offline setting, but you need to ensure that the background map is available offline. You can preload map tiles into any Android device. And this has to be set up ahead of time before going out into the field, but you can preload any background map that you'd like into the phone, so that any data collection that needs to happen, like if you were to have a workflow where you needed to, let's say, instead of walking the perimeter of a field because it's too big, you sat down with a respondent and asked them to help you draw it on the map, if that's a possibility for your workflow. This is just an example. You would, and you don't have internet connection, you would need to ensure that that background map is already on your phone, and then you could manually plot the points onto the map as you need. So that's also another feature that is available.
Sure. Amber,
And then,
before,
oh yes,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yes, I was saying before we move to, kind of summing up what you think are the key takeaways, I think someone's also written in the chat box, and I think this is good to, look at is so these tools, and I understand it, but I think it would be nice to reiterate. So these tools, would it help to record quality data for land utilization and crop estimations and surveys related to that? Could you talk a little bit about these two metrics and data points?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think that's kind of, to reiterate what we discussed. You can ask for estimates, or let's say someone might even know, their plot size in theory, or um, fairly accurately, but to ensure that you really have the most accurate data, these tools really help with that. Like, I mean, you can see in the image on the screen here kind of what that would look like, walking the perimeter of a field here, and you can see that these different points in red are points, GPS points that were taken along the way, and then it creates a closed polygon, and that gives you the exact measurement of the plot. There's no room for error. So while estimates might be really useful and they might be quicker, I think that it really depends on your own context and your own workflow. Like, how important is that data to your overall collection? Is that part of the main focus of your project? You really want to make sure that you are using methods that give you the most accurate data. Now, if that's something that isn't crucial to your data collection, or maybe an estimate is good enough. So it kind of depends on your own needs as well. But I mean, yeah, there's nothing higher quality than being able to walk the perimeter and get that exact measurement in real time.
Absolutely.
And to the point about crop estimation, there are lots of different methodologies, right? That's kind of out of the purview. That's that what methodology you want to use to do the crop estimation would be decided, before you go to conduct or design the survey. Maybe you have a situation where it's a monocrop and you have all corn in that plot. And so that's going to be one methodology where it's a little easier to understand. Well,
Yeah.
typically per square meter, this
Mm.
is how much corn you get, versus, let's say, a situation where you have intercropping and you have, you know, beans and corn or something like that. So you're going to use a different methodology, but the idea behind it is similar, where you're going to multiply whatever that estimation is of crop production per a particular unit times the total plot area.
Sure, makes sense. And please do, if there are any more questions and something's not clear, please use the chat box. I'll also call a couple of people in once we're done. One more, and I think relevant to this slide, and maybe we should take it now, Amber, is it also possible to track water bodies? Very interesting. Are these tools also feasible for water related projects, say rainwater harvesting, kind of water body rejuvenation? What are your thoughts on that one?
That is a great question, and that's not something I have a lot of personal experience with.
Hmm.
But I imagine, if you're tracking it similarly to how you would, do this with land, absolutely. I think, especially, I mean, like I said, I don't have a lot of experience, so I can't talk about it in depth. But you could use the GPS similarly, whether you want to trace. Let's say you're looking at, I don't know, like a lake over time. Is it reducing in capacity over time due to whatever factors, and you trace that that outline, and then later you come back and do a second survey and you trace it again, and over time you can compare those results, for example. That's one example I can think of, but I mean the underlying principle is the same here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amber.
Mhm.
Nandini, we can come back to your question. Let's probably close this loop and then happy to discuss more. And I have a few thoughts on this too. So maybe we come back to it. Yes,
Sure.
Amber, over to you.
Yeah, so just to briefly summarize what we've discussed today, it's really important to identify these challenges and sources of bias ahead of time. I think that's really key when designing a survey. Like, it is not possible to to eliminate all bias and all challenges, right? That's just inherent in data collection. There's always going to be things that come up, but in the pre-planning of a survey, it is really important to try to think about, okay, what issues can we anticipate, and how, what tools are available, and how can we try to mitigate those as much as possible ahead of time, so we're not dealing with, during data collection or afterwards, an error in the data that, maybe is really causing the data to maybe have some low quality data or be compromised in some way. So that's what I think is like really key, is just trying to anticipate as much as possible. Obviously, there are always going to be unforeseen circumstances, but knowing that some of these things are kind of inherent in data collection, and thinking about ways that they can be addressed either by the tools available already, like what we've discussed that is already in SurveyCTO, um, but also just in your survey design and in the pre-planning. This is completely out of the scope for this particular webinar, but making sure to pilot as much as possible in a real world situation, not just testing your survey while you're sitting at home on the computer or in the office, but taking it out into the field and testing it in the field, and that will really help identify some of these challenges, and so that they can be addressed before the actual data collection takes place. So I think, yeah, I think those are the really important points to mention here. And like I said, there's so many ways that these challenges can be addressed, and there's no way to cover them all today. But I know that the conversation is going to continue in the upcoming webinar series as well.
Absolutely. All right. So, Ayush, I think because our speakers are from Survey CTO, that's why we are looking at specific tools and features of Survey CTO. We've had, organizations from, I mean, we've had representations from Tech for Dev, we've had Goalkeep. So we've had lots of different players come on this platform and talk about solutions that they've come up with. But that's the reason why we are doing these solutions today. Yes, I think also I'd like to kind of, before we go into the Q&A piece of it, and then happy to, I think I have a really long question here from Dr. Shilpa. So definitely would call her in to ask her question. But I think what I'd definitely like to summarize with, I started with the question on saying people want to respond positively most times. People are fearful of sounding ungrateful, or people usually are quite kind of reserved with talking about sensitive topics. And I think for us, one big solution that I would offer or urge organizations to use is discrete response, right? So give the phone in the hands of your respondents wherever possible, for them to take up studies, to take up the survey themselves with some hand holding, with audio assistance. So they have the tool in their hand, they have the question in their ear, and there's no one really around to judge them, or for them to feel fearful, ungrateful, or not comfortable with sharing their responses. So I think that's one big takeaway. And maybe we reflect on how that could be done in our organizations. I think that's number one. Um, Number two, I think from a standardization for, things like education, different enumerators have different ways of saying whether a student is doing well academically or not. I think the, flows that Amber discussed are very interesting. I think India is doing very well on standardized tests. We have some great tools at hand. So how do we use these established systems or features to bring in our context? I think that's number two that I would urge organizations to think about. How do we move from, these paper pen things to something which has objectiveness, standardization, and things like that? And third takeaway, I think, is definitely the role of technology in agriculture. We can avoid, like Amber mentioned, it's difficult to say all bias is gone. I don't think any of us are there yet. But I think when you use technology like GPS and, walking around the field and saying what was there, how much could I cultivate before, how much can I cultivate now? I think that's my third key takeaway. How can our organization start looking at these simple, tools that we have at hand to make our data more reliable and not based on estimates and what people are saying, but actually based on tech and data. So these are the three things that I would like to summarize for people at the session today. um and I think yeah, so okay, Shalendra, I'll get you in here. So thank you for listening in. But yes, Dr. Shilpa Thakur, would you like to talk about the specific problem at hand, and let's try and solve it, or offer you some solutions today? Are you here? Could you speak up, please? Dr. Shilpa, are you still in the room? Oh, you can't talk. Okay, let me try and summarize your question really quickly then. I think you're talking about urban areas, where urban areas are reluctant to share information. You're having more successes in rural areas, and how can you get urban areas to talk and share data more readily, if that's what I understand. So, Amber, Syed, would you all want to talk about, uh, offer some solutions to this, and then maybe I can build on that? Any thoughts on how do you get communities who are not readily interested or, available to share data? How do you get them to talk to you?
Yeah, I think the
Sure.
same strategies that are incorporated in rural sectors would be applied here. Like the same way we talked about people that have literacy issues earlier, and then you administer surveys with audio recording that can be used. So I think the same strategy of discrete response mechanisms, perhaps using a self-administered survey like Akasi,
Mm.
allow the respondent to basically navigate through the survey themselves and perhaps answer their questions by listening to the audio instead of the enumerator being present in the room. So, like the absence of the enumerator can perhaps uh, help. It could be one strategy to help build on that. And then once you ensure that these responses are anonymous and nobody's listening to them, then these, even in the urban sector, the respondents will be more comfortable to answering and then sharing their data. So maybe I can build on that, but
Yes.
yeah.
Amber, would you like to take this question?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I think Saya did a really good job of covering like how to use the Survey CTO or whatever survey tool you're using, like those specific tools, how they can help mitigate that. But I will say also from my personal experience conducting surveys, we've run into this quite a bit. Maybe not necessarily the same exact context between urban and rural, but just different communities that have different comfort levels with answering surveys for whatever different reasons, maybe for whatever different reasons in whatever context. But I will say that in my experience, the tools are one way that can be paired with also thinking about in your in your survey methodology and design process, thinking about who the enumerators are going into these communities. So if you have one team of enumerators going into both of these contexts, maybe one team of enumerators is maybe they're more it makes sense to send these particular people into one context versus another. So really thinking about how to thinking about who you are surveying and really trying to understand that community ahead of time. And that will be by talking to local people, right? So maybe recruiting enumerators from within those communities versus bringing in people from the outside, and looking at similarities. Do they share the same language? Do they have similar backgrounds, etc., as much as possible? And that will really help make respondents feel more comfortable if they have some sort of shared connection with the enumerators versus bringing in a team from outside that maybe doesn't understand the cultural context or whatever it is quite as well. So I think that's the advice that I would give, outside of also pairing that with the tools available.
Absolutely. And I think I'd like to definitely add to this solution. One piece that we've seen works really well is context setting. And, telling your respondents why you're collecting certain data, where it's going to be used, and how it's going to add value to their lives. So, if you go and just collect data, I'm not going to let someone enter my house unless I understand the purpose of why data is being collected and how my response is actually going to add value to my own life. So I think it's very important to have introductory scripts. What are you going to ask about? Why are you asking these questions? Where is it going to be used? And most importantly, a more literate organization really cares about data privacy. So, do you talk about things like confidentiality, anonymity? I think these are very important pieces. They don't need to be a one-page long script, but I think as processes within organizations to think about these things are extremely important. So I think I definitely also, I mean, and we might have a webinar completely different on this topic of data privacy, the new laws, and what it really means for all of us, because I've been talking to so many senior leaders within organizations, who are bringing this very big piece on data privacy. And very soon people are going to stop, participating in our studies. And what does that mean for us? So probably we park that aside. But just to add to what Amber and Syed said, I think purpose of data, confidentiality, and use for improving your own life and how that's going to be used is also very, very key to this. Um, I think we have two more questions and let's take them. I definitely like to call in Buddha Singh. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your first name, but would you like to talk about what your question is? Um, I think you've heard us, but would you like to talk about boring and response management? I'm not sure I understand that one. Are you here? Are you in the room? Could you speak? Okay, I guess. And Panchali Banerjee, would you like to talk about um, qualitative data? I think it's a huge topic, but yeah, do you want to bring some context into what your question is, and then maybe um, yes, maybe Amol, but I'm not sure. Yes, would you like to talk about context of your question, Panchali? Or maybe Amol, do you face that problem? Do you want to come in and ask about survey fatigue? We have a quiet audience today.
Hi, Sharon. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll come in here. So, given the kind of work that I do, I work with migrants and their access to social security and worker protection, a lot of those things. So what we usually look at is formative research, and based on that, how to better design the program and everything else. Also, that includes SPCC, that includes document creation, a lot of things. So now this formative research in many, many contexts, it's largely qualitative. One reason, because we are not an impact assessment organization. So what we need are more nuanced responses. So we use largely traditional forms of qualitative data collection. We go with Google Forms, and of course, there's context setting. Of course, there's talk about anonymity and the purpose and so on and so forth. But the questions that we use are always, not always, I mean, at least 70, 80% times qualitative questions. And the collection is also traditional method. So we fill up these Google Forms by ourselves. We go to each respondent, or we conduct these FGDs and ITIs and so on and so forth. So then the bulk of the task remains is to look at that qualitative data, code it, and then figure out certain quantitative ways to convert that so as to analyze that data. So is there any mechanism in SurveyCTO to sort of automate that? I mean, of course, not generate codes per se, because that would also imply that the transcripts have to be read. So if we input those codes, is there a possibility that SurveyCTO might help us systematize the analysis of that qualitative data? That was my question. Yeah.
Sure. Yes, Amber, Syed, do you want to take it? I have a solution which is non-Survey CTO, but yes, if you all want to talk about Survey CTO, and then I'll talk about a platform that we use at Fourth Wheel.
Non-service CTO would absolutely be welcome as well.
Yeah. I'm just going to wait for my esteemed speakers to talk about Survey CTO, and then I'll build on that. Yes, Amber?
Sure. Well, Sharon, we'll probably hand it back over to you because, yeah, SurveyCTO is more on the data collection side. It's not a data analysis software. So we do have, we have, for instance, a data explorer where you can watch the data coming in and analyze it to an extent. But most of that type of analysis would need to happen outside of the platform. So Syed, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I think Sharon, your response might be more tailored towards this question.
Yeah. No, I think Amber is correct. Like we're not basing majorly a data analysis tool. SurveyCTO is primarily a data collection tool, but we do have some. So like SurveyCTO automatically publishes to Google Sheets, or like we have webhooks and like that use that interlink with other programs. So we do publish our data to Microsoft Azure, and then so software like these, which then is further used for the analysis. So SurveyCTO does support to the point that they're used to send your data to a different software, but after that, that is what's used for data analysis.
Super. Yes. So a quick sort of a platform that we've been using. It's quite new. We've just been kind of playing around with it for the last 3 months, but we've done 3 really big qualitative studies. It is with the SOPACT platform called Sense. So it's a primarily a qualitative analysis platform. So you could, upload Google Sheets. We're actually currently going through, a learning curve ourselves, but it's been very effective to put in, qualitative interviews with the questions. Also, then, what we normally do with NVivo or something or MaxQDA, we put in our codes. So there can be 2 ways we do it. We upload our Google Sheets, and then each question has, your quantified responses, how many people. So, for example, if you're talking about social security schemes, why were people not able to get BOCW cards, right? That could be one question. And then you have multiple responses, which gets quantified in percentages. We can then see, add our own codes that why are people not able to get, say, an Aadhaar card. We can say, okay, lack of information, how many times has that come in? We can say, lack of documentation. So we can put in our own answers and then see what that throws up. So you can do it both ways, where the Sense platform itself throws up main findings as per their analysis, and then you can build in your own codes as to what you want to see. It's also been amazing for us to then get quotes out, right? Like what are the positive quotes for getting an Aadhaar card or a BOCW card? What are the negative experiences with that? So that's been very helpful. We've been playing around with quite a few platforms. Another one, I'm not sure, Payal, you're here, but another one we were working with is a German-based platform called Reframe. So those are 2 that we've been using. And surprisingly, to be very honest, even AI platforms like ChatGPT, like Perplexity, have been really, really good for us. I mean, obviously, the length, the quantum of data really depends. but we've also been able to, kind of at least sift through a lot of information using ChatGPT and Perplexity. So those are two things that we use. Those are a couple of things that we use to solve for qualitative and quick qualitative analysis. So I hope that answers your question. Uh, I think we are a bit short on time. I think one more question, because see that with a lot of people on, I think, so, fatigue. I think there was something on survey fatigue, and there was also something on the response management, right? So, does anyone want to talk about actual challenges that you face on ground? Anything that you'd like to discuss? And that could be the last question of the session, please. I think someone wrote survey fatigue. Amol, do you want to come in here? Have you faced that challenge? Or Thami, you said something about Q&A processes. Do either of you want to ask the question?
Hi, everyone. So I didn't have a question. It was just me trying to interpret what Singh had said. But nonetheless, it would be interesting to find out how I came in late, by the way. So I found the screen where it was on the geographic locations calculating an area. So I was wondering as well, once all of that is done and knowing that the devices have different setups, settings, software and hardware qualities, how does it, when it's sent back as a response, how does it qualify with your research design? How do you make sure that you discriminate some and include some?
Sure. Yes, I think that's a question, Amber, maybe for you, and that could be the last. Thank you so much for your question. And yes, Amber, over to you.
Sure. So when you use a certain field type in SurveyCTO, there's a particular data format for that field type that will be determined, by SurveyCTO. So, for example, if you've collected the GPS points and then you are using the area function to calculate the total area, the data output, it will be just a number, but that number will be in square meters. And that's all in SurveyCTO documentation. So if you were to use that and become familiarized, you would read about that as you're programming your survey. And let's say, if you don't want to have the area in square meters, let's say you need to reference the area somewhere else in your form, but you need to convert that to hectares or something like that, then you could include another hidden calculate field within your form where you would apply the math using the particular coding relevant, and then you could convert that in your form. It wouldn't be anything that happens on the front end. That would all happen on the back end. And then, however, maybe you don't need to call it into your form, but you need that for your data output, just as an example. So there are ways to do that within SurveyCTO itself, or as we discussed, you can always, as you're analyzing the data in another platform, you can convert the format in any way that you need. Exactly. So I hope that sort of answers your question.
No, I'm good. Thanks. Understood.
Awesome. All right. So thank you, everyone. Just Syed and Amber's email IDs for, if you all need to connect further, ask more about features. And yes, so thank you very much for joining, and thank you, Amber and Syed, for an informative session. And I hope, participants would be able to adopt some, if not all, of these suggestions that we've given. So yes, thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you in the next webinars, and thank you for your time.